Happy Halloween, everyone. It's me, Andrew. I'm here at Star Cottage Studio. Sorry we're a little bit late today. William got stuck at the store handing out candy, and then he's going to be, if he hasn't already, run home to pass out candy at the house. So I didn't know it was going to go on, so I had to rush around real quick and figure things out and throw a little costume together. I don't know how long I'm going to be wearing it because apparently I'm not used to having hair. Um, and it's super hot. It's super hot, y'all. I forgot how hot it was to have hair. Um, and before anybody asks, who am I supposed to be? I don't really know. Um, Maybe that little orphan child, that works for or with Scrooge. Am I thinking, is that a real thing or am I making that up? Tiny Tim? Or is that what Greg dressed up as? I don't know. Um, Anyways, I thought today we could have a little bit of fun. And I know y'all have seen, if you've been watching these for a while, you've seen us paint some wooden pendants before. But I thought we would give it a little bit of a Halloween spin on it, since, Halloween time. So Facebook user says Oliver Twist or Tiny Tim. Either works. Maybe you know what? This is the only wig I have, so I have to do what I can do with it. Um, all right, so I thought today we would paint some pendants and make some jewelry. Um, Seasonally inspired. We probably won't have too many people in watching because it is Halloween, and I probably people have other things to do, or depending on what you celebrate, it might be different. All right, so hopefully you all are having a great start to your week so far. It's been a little bit hectic here. I feel like I always say that it's been a little bit hectic here. Um, One day, maybe someday that'll change. But really, it has been hectic. We're getting ready to do a couple different shows and travel. And there are shows that I haven't done before. So I don't really have a relationship with the show promoter really yet. So, it's one thing like if you say, oh, hey, and then you like ask a question or something. Um, and they know you. It's a different kind of vibe if they don't know you. So it's kind of navigating those interpersonal kind of things. Also, apparently, I don't know. I've just been super distracted with stuff. But anyway, so it's been a busy day kind of sorting stuff out with the different shows that we're involved in. We're getting ready to go to New York Jewelry Week, which is um, coming up in like 2 weeks. So I've been busy getting ready for that. And that's been a little bit frantic, to put it mildly, because there's just so much to do before we go. And I'd like to make some stuff so that it offsets the expense of the trip. But I'm already making stuff to offset the expense of our laser. And you may be wondering, why is he showing us laser pendant? Well, gentle reader, or actually gentle watcher, I guess. We're getting the laser, so that should be set up any day now. Hopefully sooner than later, and we'll be back into making things. So we're super excited about that. So to anybody who made a purchase in the store, in person, or online, thank you so much for all of your support in helping us get that. That's something that really has helped us tremendously, because before that, I was having to make everything one at a time. And yeah, it's hard on my hands. And I know that I have only so much time as a maker. And so Yeah, it extends the time that I have to make. So I'm super excited about that. Let's see. Harry's watching. Hi, Harry. Maria's watching. Hey, Maria. Suzanne is watching. Howdy, Suzanne. Yes, good news indeed. We're super excited about it. Facebook user says, I went to my first bead show in forever this past weekend. And it was so much fun. Oh, that's good. Um, yeah, we used to go to that show, but things change. Barbara is watching. Hey, Barbara, how's it going? Yeah, so we've been super busy with that. I've been having really bad headaches lately, and I don't know if it's because of the stress of everything. I'm used to a fair amount of stress, so I don't know if it's that. I do think it's the weather changes mostly likely. It's been rainy and cold, and then like warm, and then rainy and cold. And every time it changes, the weather changes, my sinuses get on fire. I can actually hear it popping. And I don't know if that's like a normal thing. Probably not. But like sometimes if I just like sit and I listen, I can actually hear the pressure in my sinuses moving through. And it sounds like pop, pop, pop. And it's almost like snap, crackle, pop, like that cereal, but in my face. So that's been less than delightful. But it could be worse. So I'm thankful that I've still been able to keep up mostly with everything. Just not as much as I would have liked. I had this idea that I was going to bust out all of this work over the weekend, and most of it I was just like, take care of me, William, I'm bedridden. And he was like, no, you're not. And I was like, yes, I am, care for me. And he was like, oh boy, is this what we're gonna do all weekend? And he actually like went to work and stuff, and I work too, but sometimes you know you're not feeling good, and that happens. So anyways, yeah, so we had kind of a mellow weekend because I didn't get too much done. I thought about driving down to North Carolina to see my family, and go to a show there in Asheville, but I don't think that that's going to work out time wise because I've got another event that's coming up. I have to be. We have a meetup for the Alleghenies Metal Collective in Pittsburgh on Friday, and I have to be there for that. And then on Saturday is election day for Touchstone. So we'll see if they vote me in. I was like, I don't know if I'm going to make it. I'll happily put my name forward, but who knows if they'll pick me. So we'll see. Maybe they'll pick me, maybe they won't. Barbara says weather, probably. I think it's one of those things where, thank you, Facebook user. Anyway, I think one of the things that is kind of a conundrum is we picked southwestern Pennsylvania to move, and southwestern Pennsylvania is one of those places that the weather changes pretty much every 5 minutes. And that's not necessarily a bad thing because there's like seasons, and I do enjoy living in a place where there are seasons, but my sinuses don't. My sinuses are like, what you doing? You need to go to the place that's temperate, that never changes ever. um and so here we are, and I was like, what place is that? Maybe like an island somewhere. Bonnie says, I love your costume. Thanks. I threw it together in less than 5 minutes. So I'm happy with it too. I was like, what is like a tired orphan child? I was like trying to think of like a book about a tired orphan child. Um, but I don't actually look that much like a child. So I don't know. nondescript blonde-headed person with a newsy cap and a check scarf or flannel scarf that's actually super hot. So yeah, that's about how used to when I was younger, I used to go all out for costumes and we would like plan, and it was like a lot of fun, and I loved dressing up and helping other people dress up, and we get like super into it. And now William, he doesn't like to dress up, so we don't dress up. So that part of my life has pretty much ended, even though I try to coax and coerce him super hard all the time. But he's like, no, no. And then usually we like compromise. And then if you compromise, you only get like vanilla, it's like super watered down. So then they're like, is that really a costume, or did you just put on a jacket that you just haven't worn in a long time and combed your hair different? And then so there you go. Amanda says Peaky Blinder. I can't do the accent for that. That's for sure. Julie says, I almost didn't recognize you. Isn't it startling? One time I went to this Halloween party with my friend Kat Merrick, and I wore this wig because it kind of looks real. And I had this stuff that you can put on your eyebrows, and it makes them look not as dark. But apparently now that's like a thing. I was like watching TV the other day, and I saw all these blonde-headed people with real dark eyebrows, and I was like, oh, well, is that like a thing now? But anyways, so we went to this Halloween party, and somebody was flirting with me super hard, and it was getting super hot. And so I took my wig off for a second, and then I noticed that had instantly dried up. So that's I don't know. That apparently they had fallen. They were smitten with my golden locks, and then when they realized that they weren't real, they were no longer interested in the bald-headed Asian. They're like, you look so. It's so unusual to see. So, are you like Asian or something? Blonde? As they were getting kind of confused. I think I read a book like that once, and there's going to be there. I see the numbers just dropped. That's all right. All right, so let's flip this camera around before I share more embarrassing stories from Halloween. We used to get super festive for Halloween, and it would be like all weekend, and then like the Halloween day too. So we'd like go to the Halloween parade, and there were like costume changes along the way. Maybe one day I'll dig up the photo album, and then y'all can enjoy. Maybe not. Maybe not. Maybe I'll get rid of those pictures. All right, so I'm gonna flip this around. You're gonna see the ceiling for a second, and yeah, I'll say that we decorated for Halloween and put cobwebs, but that's just there all the time. So please enjoy. Happy Halloween, y'all. Are any of you doing or did anything fun for Halloween? Did anybody get dressed up or is going out? William's probably handing out candy. We had to, he had to run to Walmart to get candy because a lot of the places around here were sold out. I'm working on another project, and I'm just going to show you a sneak peek of it. But these are called hagstones, and then these are shells that have natural holes. And then I've just been beating them, and I'm going to actually take off some layers so I don't roast to death in the meantime. So these ones are actually, so I'm going to do, I don't know, I made this thing. There's a show coming up, and it's about materials that don't cost a lot of money. And so it's like, so free is like not a lot of money. So most of these I found on the beach in Florida. So you can't get more inexpensive than free, right? Maybe if somebody pays you to work with them, then that's like more. So we'll see. I think I'm gonna put that, and then in between, I'm gonna do some crazy loop-de-loops with these bigger red beads. Diane says, "You look so cute. Thanks." Maria says, "Happy Halloween." Bonnie says, "I carve pumpkins." We used to carve pumpkins every once in a while. We haven't done it since Paolo passed away because he was the pumpkin kid. But maybe once we have his pumpkin patch, we'll carve pumpkins again. Suzanne says, "I'm Harlequin." Oh, good. You'll have to share pictures. Marie says, "I'm dressed like an old lady." LOL. Bonnie says, "That's so creative. Thanks." So I think it could be cool. We'll see. I've noticed that some of the stuff that I make is more geared towards being wearable, and that's not always the best stuff to send to be shown in like gallery shows. So I may do something wild, maybe put like a seagull wing or something, um, and that may increase my chances of getting shown. But we'll see. That show that I'm applying to is going to be in North Carolina. We're going to go down and see a symposium, and there's a show at the same time that features unconventional materials that are inexpensive. So we'll see if that works. I have a little bit of time to work on that, so we'll see. But that's kind of what I've been doing. One of the projects that I've been doing in the background. All right. So let's do some painted pendants. And I started some and I worked on some more. So I do a lot of demos. I get asked to do a lot of demos on painting, um, uh, wood, and things like that, because we sell them and it's a great way to customize your pieces. So I did a demo up in Lancaster for Bead Fest and spoke about different ways to embellish wooden pendants and components. And so, yeah, I do a lot of these. So I end up with a lot of samples kind of like in halfway process. So you'll see, like, this is one that I started and kind of finished while I was there, and then I kind of hit it with a little bit of Gilder's paste at the end to kind of bring out that kind of gold on it. I kind of like that. I think it kind of reminds me of a Maxfield Parrish painting, if you know what I'm talking about. He does these really dramatic skies, and there's a lot of like pinks and violets, and then some intense kind of cobalt blues as the shadows, and then there's like these bright gold kind of accents to it. um, and so they're very kind of dreamy and romantic, so I kind of like that vibe. Maybe there's a little bit more red than in a Maxfield Parrish painting, but um, yeah, so you never know where you're gonna get inspiration from. So there's one. Um, let's see. Amanda says our pumpkin is a puking pumpkin. The kids are loving it. That sounds cute. Julie says, "I love these shells. Thanks. I think they're fun. The cool thing is that I'm not having to augment them too much. Sometimes you have to drill like things, but I tried to find stones that had natural holes in them, and they call these hag stones. And in certain parts of the world, they use them to protect people. Um, and they would make little amulets and things. And some people say that if you look through the hole, you can see fairy through there. Um, but that's everybody's different. All right, so that's that. Um, and then Cindy says hello to you all on this Halloween evening. It's raining, so I don't know how many kids are actually gonna be coming. But you know what? One time it was like super cold and it was pretty much snowing, and there were still kids coming. Um, Sometimes I want to be miserly and then be like, I'm not gonna give no candy. But then I think about when I was a kid and how we didn't have very much money growing up, and how like Halloween was like my most favorite holiday of all, because it didn't matter if you had money or not. You could get dressed up and whatever and go from house to house and get candy, all the candy you could want and more. And so I kind of bully William into giving out more candy than, because we have to give it out twice because we have a store in town and then we live in town, so we give it out twice. And he's like, "Why don't we just pick one?" And sometimes if we're like super budget conscious, we'll only give it at one, but we try to give it at both because it's super fun and we like to see all the costumes, which I'm missing, but I'm hanging out with y'all, so that's okay. Julie says, yes, Paris skies are fabulous. Michelle says, hi, Andrew. Hi, AG Bead fam. Happy Halloween, y'all. Bonnie says, it's so beautiful here. I'm sure lots of kids will trick or treat. Yeah, it's really beautiful here, but it's dark, y'all. It's like nighttime. And next week it's supposed to be, I think it's is it daylight savings time next weekend? Or this weekend coming up? I don't know, but I'm a little bit scared because it feels like it's dark already all the time, which I don't necessarily mind, but I don't know. So I this is one of the samples that I sort of kind of did, and then um, here are some of the other ones that I started, and they look more orange on camera, which they kind of are orange, but I hit it with this fluorescent pink, which also kind of sometimes looks orange. Pink and orange are chromatically very similar, which is maybe odd to think about, but you know, especially the fluorescent ones. So, and then on the other side, I did it in a blue. And then these ones, y'all saw me do these, I'm sure, as gold leaf thieves. Or maybe that's gold paint. It looks like gold leaf. And then I did this one. This one was Swelligant. And so it looks like a rusty old metal piece, but it's actually wood. And then these ones, I have a bunch of them. So this is a sample that I added some of this like glaze to, a glitter glaze. I don't know if I love that. I actually liked it better before I added that, but I guess it's festive. I think if I added an antique washing to it, like a little bit of raw umber to it, it'll make it look less Lisa Frank, and more kind of Telltale Heart style. It looked like this before I put that kind of sparkly pink on it, pinkish purple. So I'm more this flavor. This one is maybe not. And then this one, I think it works. It's got a gold glitter to it, but I did like a pink um, with just talk about Maxfield Parrish. Here you go, y'all. I have a little series here of locked hearts. I don't know what that's saying. And then this one I hit with some of this interference paint or color change paint. So in some lights, it kind of looks not that exciting, kind of looks like brown. And then there, laser beam on. No, you get that kind of hit of that blue, and I think that's pretty cool. But look, once it's not in that light, once it doesn't hit that light just right, it kind of changes. Maria says this weekend is daylight savings time. Time falls back next weekend. Julie says, I forgot how you got that raised texture on the heart. This one, I think this one is dirt. Believe it or not. I got a little bit of sand and I mixed it into my paint and then I went over it. I'm fairly certain that's how I got that texture. Because if you look really close, it's got like a fine texture. So I sprinkled a little bit of sand into the top of it with a wet, while the gesso was still wet. I just sprinkled it on top and pushed it in. And then once it was dry, I did a layer on top and then put the paint on top of that. And it gave it a cool texture. Facebook user says, end of daylight saving, boo-hoo. And they all said, pew, pew. And Michelle says, that is so cool. And Julie says, cool, I'm going to try it. Looks awesome. Thanks. I think there's a lot of things that like you can do to augment and change your paint. So don't be intimidated to try. There's a lot of things. There's an artist named Michael Domingue. And normally when you heat gun stuff, you don't want to crispy char things. But sometimes he does that. He like will overheat something and it gets all crunchy and burnt up a little bit and then paints on top of that. So, there's all different techniques of how to kind of achieve different looks. Now, this is one of those. I did gold leaf underneath, and then I did mica chips on top, mica flakes, and I think that's one of my favorite things. I haven't seen anybody else do it, so I'm going to officially claim it as my idea on wooden pendants. I mean, this comes as a pre-manufactured product, so it's not really my idea, but I've never seen anybody else do it, so I'm claiming it. So if you see anybody else using these on wooden pendants, be like, oh, didn't Andrew Thornton from Allegory Gallery do that? And then they'll be like, uh-huh. No, don't do that. I don't need any more internet fights. All right. So I did a gold leaf and then I put that mica flakes on top. And then I let it, when it dries, it kind of looks pasty before it dries, but then it dries clear. And then I did an antiquing glaze on top of that. And it kind of it brought out some of that texture. And then here's a piece that's in transition. So this one, I just painted it gold as opposed to did the gold leaf. And you get a different kind of vibe. And the cool thing is that the pieces are big enough of this mica that you can kind of place them. So if you wanted to do them as like a dragon scale or like a mermaid tail or something, you could definitely do that. Now I didn't put the antiquing glaze on this one, and it's far more shiny. Me and Cynthia and the kids, we went to this waterfall. I think it's called Catawba Falls, outside of Old Fort in North Carolina. And at the base of the waterfall, I thought I was tripping because I saw all these gold coins in the water. And I was like, oh my gosh, am I hallucinating? Did I like pass some kind of mushroom that spored in my face, like those movies? And then when I got closer and dug around in the water, they turned out to be these perfectly round pebbles that had been tumbled in the water, and the pebbles were flat because they were sheets of mica. And mica, when it's a naturally occurring form, you can actually peel the layers apart. Um, and so it grows in layers. And so it kind of, when it broke off, it and originally it broke off and was kind of relatively flat. And the way that the light was hitting it, it was reflecting off of the mica. And so it looked almost like there was like a a whole bunch of gold coins at the base of this waterfall. And we got a couple of them. I wish we had gotten more, but I don't want to like over harvest or whatever. I don't know if that's like a thing out for rocks, but you know. Um anyway, so maybe I'll go back next time I'm down, and hopefully it's not cold when I go, and I'll get some more, and maybe I'll set some because they were really pretty. Of course, when they dried out, they weren't quite as pretty, but I think I could do something to the surface of it to kind of bring out that shine. So this is the after, this is the before and after kind of vibes. And this is that sand technique before. You can kind of see it's in there. It's kind of crusty and chunky, but that's before the top layers are put. So I also think that sometimes if you work in super heavy layers, you don't always get to do all the cool tricksy effects. So sometimes if you establish like a good base layer and get those different colors, like these are not like my favorite colors. This actually looks like a 1980s or 1990s cup with a little squish and then like maybe like poop on top. So that's not my favorite the way it is. However, if you just hit this lightly with a little bit of like alizarin crimson and just lightly do a wash over there, it will kind of bring it all together, and then hit it with a little bit gold on the highlights, and then it will look like this as opposed to that. I mean, I'm not totally hating on this. I can see where it has its place, but like my flavor is this. Uh, Michelle says, "Oh yes, you can see the difference." Sandra says, "Hi Andrew." Hi Sandra. Teresa says, "Hi, I'm at Ocean City Resort Gift Expo in Maryland with my daughter selling our jewelry. Catch you on the replay." Well, hopefully you have a super successful show and you make lots of connections and it's very profitable. This is a technique that I did, and I don't know if I kind of rushed it, and which is kind of a way, sometimes you have accidents, and you're at first you're like, oh, that looks terrible, but then you start thinking about it, and you're like, oh, maybe if I harness that accident, I can control it. So I did gold leaf on top, and I was going for kind of an enameled look. So I mixed a little bit of the paint with the glaze, and I put the glaze on top of the gold leaf to kind of give it an enameled look, like a glassy enameled, like a cloisonne almost look where they put the gold leaf or the silver leaf behind it. The problem that I had was I hit it with a heat gun to dry it quicker, and it caused it to crack. And I don't know if you can see that or not, but it cracked. And then I also made it bubble. And that's what these are, these little bubbles right here. Um, so in theory, one might say, oh, that's a loss. But the cool thing is I can always paint over this and then it will be painted on and you'll never know that there was an accident. But also this crackle effect, even though this isn't the best application for this, at least in my mind, it is an interesting idea. So what if I did the whole thing and then purposely heated it until it had that crackled look? You know, um, there's a technique of creating a crackle texture with Elmer's glue. You paint on Elmer's glue and you let it dry so that the surface is dry. And then you hit it with either a heat gun or a hair dryer, and the surface tension shifts. It's kind of like a skin on a pudding, and it will pull apart and kind of creates a crackled look. That's before they had the crackle mediums. The crackle mediums, I don't know. I have mixed feelings about the crackle mediums. There's a couple different crackle mediums, but the crackle medium that is like the most readily available, the cracks are not very noticeable. So I guess that's good in some ways, but I also feel like it's so subtle that it's almost like it doesn't really have that much of a visual impact. So it's kind of like why do it, you know? Or maybe I'm just not using it right. So that could also be there. Um Anyways, so sometimes you can experiment and find out different things. I think this is not what I intended, but I think that the result may yield fruit, as they say, but unexpected fruits. Um, and I can kind of harness that as a technique more purposefully. Here's another one of these. This is what this looked like before I added the pink. So it's a little bit. I'm like, are my eyes busted? No, but this is I was like, is that pink or is it orange? This has definitely got the pink on it. The fluorescent pink, and you can actually see it in the light. A lot of those fluorescent colors are matte, so you can kind of see it in the light where I hit it with that. And then this is a sister of this one, but I didn't do the brown on top. And normally, once one side is dry, I would then go back over and do the other side. Now, this is with that glitterific folk paint. I added that, and it has a lot different. Like, this is a natural material. Mica is a natural kind of glitter, and it has a very different vibe than this. I don't mind, like, I still like it, but it's very different because it's like, it's like really bling bling, which has its purpose, And this is with nail pot, or no, this is with embossing powder. You can get a stamp like so, and then sprinkle the embossing powder on, and then hit it with a heat gun, and it will fuse. It's kind of like, it reminds me of what happens with powder coating, but powder coating is much finer, and you use an electrostatic charge to have the powder stick to the metal pieces. Since this isn't metal, the only way to do that is if I were to electroform the piece first with a copper solution and then powder coat on top of that. And the that'll work. However, every time you add layers, you're losing detail. So you just have to keep that in mind. If you want something that is like a general shape, then that'll be good. But if you have something that's like super fine, it can fill in the holes, and unless you're like super meticulous about cleaning the holes, it will just fill in those holes, and you can lose a lot of detail that way. That's with anything. With some of the metal pieces or any kind of painting that you're doing, if you put too many layers of paint and they're too thick, you're going to obscure detail. And I know some people, they get frustrated because they'll approach something and they'll like really glob on the paint. And then they're like, oh my gosh, I ruined this piece. Now, if you happen to overpaint something, you can always try to remove the paint. But a cool effect that you can do is to get a buffing block or a sanding block and hit it. And then only the highlights will kind of poke through and you'll get some of that detail back. You can only do that so much though, because you are removing a little bit of metal while you're doing that. So just be mindful, just use that with a bit of caution when you do that technique. However, it's a really cool technique that kind of brings back that metallic flavor. So if you want to do that, you can always there's always ways of salvaging pieces, especially painted pieces. And then this one is nail polish, believe it or not. That's this fancy nail polish that I think it's called Unicorn Blood or something like that. And it's got all these little glitter chips in it. Whoops. All right, so let's paint something new. So you're not all just like hanging out and watching me go through old. This is cool. I think this is silver leaf that I did on top of gold. But anyway, so I like to work, when I'm working on these pieces, I tend to like to work on a tile. The tiles are great because you can, let me wipe this off real fast. The tiles are great because you can always pick it up. It's portable. And so you can move your pieces around so you can see it. Sometimes if you're working on a flat surface and it's wet paint, it's really super tricky to transport things unless you plan in advance. So I like to work on like something like this, like a tile, because it's heat resistant. If I don't care if it's heat resistant or not, I will use these plastic placemats because they're lightweight and I can again pick them up and move them. Now this piece I started already, so I'm going to work with this one. I put down a layer of gesso. The first thing I did was I lightly sanded the surface of the wood with 220 grit sandpaper. It's super rough and it scuffs the heck out of it, but it's good because it creates a tooth, and that tooth, you need that tooth or that texture for the gesso to sink into and really grab to and bond to the surface. Now, if you're using a paint that's like the vintage patina paints or the ultimate paint or whatever it's called, the new version of it, you don't have to have the gesso. However, if you're going to do something with acrylics or colored pencils or all kinds of different things, you do need to put that base layer down or it's just not going to stick. The wood has a plasticizer in it that they use. It's a plywood. So they take veneers and they sandwich them onto like an MDF or substrate. I don't know what their substrate is. I think it's MDF. And they sandwich it in, and that glue that they use to sandwich it together, it makes it slightly waterproof. So it's kind of like those countertops, the like from the 70s, those wood countertops that were actually like not real wood. They're the veneer stuff. And so so you need to since it's got that plasticizer on there, it makes it slightly waterproof, which in most regards is good. You don't necessarily want your wood to soak up water because the wood will distort the wood or mess with it and soak up into it. Um, and so with that kind of plasticizer, it makes it a little bit waterproof, which is good normally. However, if you're trying to get a water-based product to stick to it, that's less than ideal. So that's when you have to put the base layer down. Now, you can put the base layer down by lightly sanding the surface of the wood and then painting even coats, or in this case, less than even coats of gesso, letting that dry completely. Oh, and here's another pro tip. Here, I'm going to go off script a little bit. Take a paper towel with a little bit of rubbing alcohol and wipe your pieces down. And what this does is it cleans your piece, and that alcohol cuts any oils. Believe it or not, you have oils on your hands. Well, some people do. Some people don't moisturize, and so they don't have like a lot of oils in their hands. I moisturize the heck out of it on my hands because do a lot with metal smithing, and they get raggedy rough, and I don't like them to be raggedy rough. So I exfoliate and put a lot of moisturizers on my hands so that they're not super rough. Um, like a little bit sturdy is not that bad because then you can like do stuff. Like when I was in the restaurant and I pretty much lost the sensation in my fingertips for years because I was picking up hot plates and hot cups and hot this and hot that. But anyways, long story short, there's little oils in your hands, and those oil does not necessarily mix with water. So if you like touch something and then you try to put something like a thin wash of water, you'll see it bead up and go away from the oils. The same thing with enamels, the same thing with a lot of the like those processes that require that fusion of surface. If you get oils on the surface, it will cause a lot of issues. Sometimes you can use that. You could use it as a resist. You can make your own brisket, which is like a medium that you use so that when you paint over it, you can peel it up and then there's a design left. If you put a little bit of oil in a brisket, it will help keep it even more from saturating. Though sometimes it will make it not stick, so you have to be careful. But anyways, so with oils and stuff in there, your goal is to make it as clean as possible. Now, the other thing is if you've sanded it with a 220 grit sandpaper to create that tooth, you're also creating dust. And normally dust, in my world is just a part of my world. Like some people work in studios where it's like hermetically sealed and they have like lab coats on and they have gloves and there's HEPA filters everywhere and they don't have pets. But in my real world, I have animals and I have all kinds of stuff. And as I mentioned earlier, there's probably cobwebs in here and all kinds of stuff. So dust is a part of my reality. However, the thing about that is sometimes that can be detrimental to the thing that you're trying to do. So, and what I mean by that is if you have too much dust or junk on the surface of your piece, that can create a problem. And so there's two different things that can happen. One is that it will act like the oils and act as a resist. It's kind of like flouring bread dough, the surface while you're working with cookies or dough or whatever. You flour the surface so it doesn't stick. So you don't want your piece to, if you want something to stick, you don't want it to not stick. So cleaning it off with that paper towel with a little bit of rubbing alcohol or isopropyl alcohol will remove that dust and make sure that it's ready. Now, you can wash your pieces with warm soapy water if you are sensitive to chemicals and you don't want to like breathe in the alcohol smell. I knew somebody who was sober and going through their sobriety steps, and they couldn't be around rubbing alcohol because it enticed them too much. And I know that sounds kind of weird, but I guess it kind of smelled similar. I was like, have no desire to drink rubbing alcohol myself, but if it's having a problem, by all means, use warm soapy water and like a toothbrush and get in there. The only thing though is that if you do that, you want to make sure that you dry your piece out completely before you do any of the next steps. Because if your piece is soaking wet, you're going to create other problems for yourself. So you don't want to create those other problems. You want to make sure that that you're setting yourself up for success, and you're not going to create more problems than what you started. So if you take that little paper towel that's soaked with alcohol and wipe it, it dries super fast because it evaporates, and it will also cut the oil and cut the grease on them. So that's helpful. Now the other thing is not only do you not want the powder or the dust of sanding to be a non-stick, but you also don't want it to necessarily mix with your paint or whatever you're putting on the surface. Now, sometimes it doesn't matter. If you have a lot of texture, like in this piece, it doesn't really matter at all, right? But if you have a piece that you want a super smooth surface and you want the paint to glide on, and when it dries, you want it to dry to a glassy finish, you do not want to put that dust in there, because that dust will thicken your paint and it will cause clumps, kind of like gravy, and you don't necessarily want clumpy gravy. So just wipe the surface off and you'll be good to go. Now, if you don't care about that and you want it to be chunky monkey style, go on ahead, do it. It's your art. You can do whatever you want with it. Nobody's going to tell you what to do. You have the power. You are in control. Um, but if you want something to be a certain way, sometimes you have to do certain things to get it like that. Like if you want that glass-like finish, you have to clean the surface really good, and then you have to do at least two layers of gesso. One stroke this way, let it dry, sand it with 600 grit sandpaper, wipe it down, go the opposite direction with the sandable gesso, let it dry, sand it, and then add more layers of it, sanding in between, wiping and cleaning in between. And then once you get at least three, probably two or three lay coats, always going in alternate directions so it fills in any kind of brush stroke uh, marks created by brush strokes. Um, then you move through the different sandpapers. So you start really low and you go really high. And the lower the number is on the sandpaper, the rougher it is. And the higher the number, it means the smoother and less coarse it is. So if you sanded at 600, then you'd go to 800, and then you'd go to 1,000, and then you'd go to 1,500, and then 2,000. And they even have one that is as high as 3,000, and it basically feels like a piece of paper, but you get like this mural like surface on the surface. Now, that's not for everything. Like, you don't need to do that or go to all that trouble when you're doing this. That's only if you want that super, super high, perfect, almost like, a stone like perfection. Um, that's super smooth and glass like. You don't, if you're just like painting and you want kind of funky textures and stuff, you don't need to do that. That is only if you want that super smooth surface. So it just depends on what kind of a effect that you're trying to achieve. All right. Now that I have lulled you all into a coma with the sound of my voice talking about oil and water, we're just gonna get going, right? All right, I've got a wolf. I've got a crescent moon. As I mentioned, I don't live in a life that there's no hairs. I have those in my life. Let's see. I've got these stars. That's kind of fun too, and Halloween themey. And then this raven, and maybe this cat. Let's do all of them. All right, so I've got this. This one is got a coat of gesso, so this is good to go, yo. I don't need that. That's already ready. I don't need to worry about that. But these ones, I don't have them. This one, it feels like I sanded, but I don't know that for certain. But you can kind of see what happens. Like, look at that splotch of color on there. Those splotches of color are because of that shiny surface repelling the water, and the water is beating up and creating that. So if I just rub this, like if I rub this, I could basically rub it off. So you don't want to get to the point where you can rub off the paint. I mean, if you rub anything on the, like if you get the sandpaper, you're going to be able to rub this off. If you rubbed your fingers on this and you like use this as a worry stone, you could rub this finish off. I'm not saying that this is indestructible by any means, but this finish will last a long time if you follow the steps and you don't roll on the concrete, you know, start the Buddhist prayer meditation where you're rolling your fingers on it. Um, if you kind of respect it for what it is, it will last a very, very long time. And it's very durable. It actually makes some of the painting techniques actually make it even more durable, believe it or not. All right. So what I'm going to do is let's do a darker base and work on that. So with these they don't make them anymore, but they last a really long time. So I still have these. And just because they don't make it anymore doesn't mean that I'm not going to use it. So I'm going to pretty much use these until there's no more. So these you have to shake up really good so that there's a full distribution of the emulsifier throughout. And if you can't hear that ball clanking inside, then it means you need to shake harder. And sometimes it'll get stuck. Sometimes the pigment and stuff will separate, especially if you haven't used them in a long time. So sometimes I'll have, when I go visit the kids, I will have, I'll bring my patina paints and I'm like, oh, let's have a game. Everybody shake the paint. And then they shake it and then it's nice. It's Max's birthday, by the way, if you didn't know that. I have to call after this is done. But the thing is that they're young and it's Halloween, so I don't want to be all like, hey, let's talk to your elderly uncle on your birthday when they're trying to hang out with their friends and like do stuff. All right, so sometimes these holes get plugged. I just have a head pin here and I'm gonna knock this and really get in there. You can tell that I've been successful when the head pin comes out and it's colored. All right. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take a little bit of this and I'm going to put the cap back on. I used to be with it. I used to hang out with this person and they used to always leave the caps off of the markers and it would drive me crazy because then the markers would get all dried up. So I'm just going to be really loose about this. This brush is nothing special. As you can clearly see, this brush has seen better days. But I don't mind that. Like, I think it's sometimes my most chewed up brushes are some of my favorites. And I'm just going to layer this in here. And sometimes you want to stroke it, brush strokes, even brush strokes. Sometimes you don't want that to like be moving all around town. So you can just dab it on. It's self-leveling. So in theory, if you miss a spot, it should help fill in anything. Now, this surface, I did not do anything to. This is straight up wood. The wood pendant as they come. This not anything, I didn't do any preparation to the surface. Now you can kind of see that there is a little bit of, believe it or not, there is a little bit of separation happening. And I think it is because I didn't do the surface, but that's okay because I'm just going to put a little bit more on and it will bond. So I like to heat set my patina paints. I think you get uh, a deeper and fuller bond to your surface when you do that. This by itself is pretty sturdy. So if you don't have a heat gun or you don't want to have a toaster oven that's dedicated, then it should be fine when it dries. However, I will say that once you heat set it, it will adhere significantly more. And I should do a little test of this so that you can see the difference of how much more sturdy it makes it. I mean, it's pretty remarkable. And I think what happens is that on a thermal layer, it bonds to the surface. So it's not just like two separate things. It almost fuses on a like a on a I don't know if molecular is the right word for that, but it fuses on a much smaller level, and it's just not like sitting on the surface. All right, I'm gonna wash that brush out as good as I can get it to be washed out, and then I'm gonna hit it with a heat gun. Now, sometimes they will want to move, so I recommend having something that's not flammable so that you can hold it if you need it to, because this is a slick surface, and so you're going to be applying the heat gun, and it shoots hot air out, and so these can fly off the surface of this if you're not careful. But I've got this on the low setting, and I'm just easily, and then I don't want to blow any hairs on that. If you do get like a hair stuck in it, don't worry, because you can always burn it off. And I know that sounds crazy to do, but the heat gun actually can burn the hairs off. You can always just pull them off as well. And you can kind of see, at least I can see the difference of when it is fully cured. It's still shiny, but it's not as shiny as when it is wet. Like on this piece, you can see, I don't know if you can see it or not, but there are still wet spots. Like you can see around that hole at the top, there's a spot. Right here, there's a spot. And right here. Now, probably what this is I had it too thick, the application, and I was drying it too quickly, and that's causing that kind of pull apart effect, like that cracking effect. Now, it's not a big deal because I can always go back over and paint over it, and I'm not looking for like super smooth, which this is kind of pretty smooth, so. And this is on the highest setting, but you see what I mean? They're like that. It's like that game air hockey. Now, one thing to be mindful of is that if you're working on a surface like this and it's like crusty underneath, sometimes if you heat this plate up or this tile up and this gets hot, it will act almost like a glue and it can stick to the surface of this. Now, a trick to get this clean is like if you have a tissue blade from when you're doing like polymer clay and stuff. Let's see if I have a tissue blade nearby. You can peel it up. And then you just wash it with warm soapy water and it will be good as new, y'all. Generally speaking, when I have a palette, I just use the top of a lid or something, and it will get caked on super hard. And eventually I just peel it right off. So it's not a big deal at all. You know? So we've got these, and I want to make these a little bit more festive. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get some of this kind of purple. This is called opalite. Let's see. I didn't think it would. And I've got my head pin that I used earlier. I'm going to wipe it off just so that I don't cross-contaminate. Now, another thing you can do is you can take a little bit of alcohol, rubbing alcohol, and use that as well to wipe your surface to get it nice and clean. When I do my scrimshaw pieces, I use a solvent to help with that process. Now this is garnet. And I'm going to get some more of this cobalt blue. And you only need a small amount. Now I'm getting a new brush, and I'm getting I like to work with a dry brush with this because I found that when you mix some of these, if you use a wet brush, it will cause the paint to kind of curdle. And I don't necessarily want that to happen. Now, this garnet has a lot more kind of an orangey red to it. So when you mix that purple in there, purple and yellow are contrasting. So this will make it a little bit brownish, which is not necessarily what I was going for. But I'm going to kind of keep going, mixing this. And I'm actually going to get, if I can find it, I'm going to get a little bit of this ruby because it has a little bit more of a magenta undertone. And the magenta undertone will help bring it back to a cooler color family. Or I shouldn't say it will bring it back to a cooler color family, but it's got more blues in it than like a red. So if I'm trying to make a beautiful purple, then this will help kind of bring it back, making it less brown and more purpley, more of a purple as opposed to a kind of brownish purple. All right. And then I'm just going to lightly hit this over here on one side. And I'm basically going to do an ombre effect on these. So I'm going to wipe this brush off. I don't want this paint to dry on my brush because then it will no longer be a brush. It will basically be a stylus at that point. And I don't want to do that. So I just took this kind of medium color that I mixed up and went across the middle. I generally start when I'm doing an ombre effect, I'll start with one color and move it into another color. But we started the base of this color is that cobalt blue, so it's already mixed in there. So it's already part of that color family. So I don't necessarily have to do that. I don't need it to go all the way into that. Now, if this paint happens to dry before you can get that sorted out with a blending, that's not the end of the world. You can just go back over that area and then hit it with, go back in and hit it again with that to blend that kind of purpley color or that kind of grapey color with that more brownish purple. Now, I will say that the paint is drying a little bit quicker because I heated the surface of this tile with the heat gun. So it is creating a little bit of that. It's creating a little bit, it's making the paint dry out a little bit quicker. That's not necessarily a bad thing because then it makes me kind of work quicker. And what I'm doing now is I'm taking this lightest color and I'm just hitting it around the other edge and just dabbing that really quickly. And it's creating a nice kind of soft, dreamy kind of purpley haze, lavender haze. And I like that. Now I'm going to go back over that. And what I'm going to do here is I might start indicating some stars. And right now they're going to look like polka dots, and that's fine. One thing about stars is when you look at them, they're not all uniformly the same size. Some stars are bigger, some are smaller. And also, depending on how far away they are, they will be different sizes or, different shapes even. They're not all just round. So when I'm painting stars, I try to put in a variety of mark making so that you can see that variation. Now, that may not look like very much now, and it isn't. I'll be honest, it's not like a masterpiece by any stretch of the imagination. But as we build layers, it will start to develop. Now you can see that this is already mostly dry. So when it's dry on here, that's warning time. It's like, whoa, you need to wash that brush out. You need to do it. Emergency, emergency. And I'm going to do that now. This looks terrible, by the way, but that's okay. Now I like to wipe the bristles out and then rinse it again, just because I use these brushes for other things too. So I don't want them to get all kind of gummed up. I don't really have very expensive brushes, but the brushes I do have, I want to last a little bit longer. So I've gone ahead and I'm going to heat set these real quick and help them dry. So I'm going to arrange these like so. Get that heat gun back out. As I just blew a bunch of crumbs everywhere. But that's all right. Now, one thing is I'm always moving the heat around. You'll notice that I'm not like really zoning in on one piece and like sticking it there. Because if you do that, you will burn your piece and you'll scorch it. And you can actually smell the wood when it starts getting hot like that. So I'm keeping this moving so that it doesn't create any hot spots. If I create any hot spots, it's going to not only possibly catch the wood on fire, but it's also going to bubble the paint, which is kind of a cool technique if you want it. However, just be mindful that it could catch on fire, and we don't necessarily want to start the Halloween Inferno of 2022. So, all right, so this is completely dry. It dries super quick on its own, but you can already see there's something interesting happening, right? That's pretty cool, right? Is it me or is this cool? Or am I tripping and it's like homely? I think it's pretty cool. Before we go any further, though, I am going to hit the backs. And that way we can have finished pieces. So I'm going to get some of this cobalt. And the opalite has kind of a white into it. So I'm going to get this ruby, which also has a white in it. And sometimes what they do is they will put white in there to extend the color or to make it more opaque. All right. And so I'm just going to mix this. And it made a lovely kind of grapey color. Concord grape. And hit the backs. Amanda says, I love it. Looks fantastic. Thanks, Amanda. All right, so even coat. And I am not thinking about anything in particular. I just want to get it on the surface of there. If I have to go back and patch anything, I will. One pro tip that I'm gonna go off script for a second and give you a pro tip is if you have a new brush, this was a new brush, pull some of the before you get really going, pull some of those excess bristles out. I didn't, and so this piece has all kinds of hairs from the bristles. So before you get started, that's a good thing to do, is to kind of loosely do it. Don't try to yank all the hairs out, because you probably will. You could pull them all out if you tried hard enough. And then mix that up and go back in. Now, if you fill a hole on accident, let me fill a hole on purpose. I put too much paint in here, and in theory, it can create like a bubble. So if you can see that, it's filled in. Just lightly blow on it, and it will open right back up. Now, if it's being super stubborn, you can always take, a needle or a head pin and just slightly tap it, and it should be enough to break the surface tension and create that, release some of that, make it so it doesn't fill the hole anymore. All right. So I'm going to hit this a little bit because this one's a little bit lighter. So I'm going to hit that on there. I've got a little bit more paint, so I'm going to use it up. And I'm doing this kind of scrubbing technique. And this is so that if I'm kind of rejuicifying the surface of this pendant. When you add more paint, it will reactivate some of the paint if it's not completely dry yet. So I can kind of peel up some of those hairs that are trapped under there. And if I'm super concerned about it, I can go in with an X-Acto knife and pull those out and then just paint back over it, and you won't even see it. Okay, I'm going to wash that out and pull this out. But you can see, like, I rinsed it out and there's still stuff in there. So I'm going to go back in and rinse it again. And when basically you're done cleaning them once the water comes off and it's not colored. All right. And I'm going to kind of arrange these so that they're not on top of anything. And then I'm going to pull that out and hit it with a heat gun. Also, you don't want to be right on top of the piece. I'm kind of too close right now. Generally speaking, it's like 6 inches. And this is definitely not 6 inches. And when you heat the wood with a heat gun, you can kind of smell the wood. Um, so make sure that you're in a well ventilated area. Whenever you're working with chemicals or heat and things like that, make sure you have ventilation because something that may be inert by itself, like on its own, can quickly become not inert. All right, so I have a little bit of this gloss glaze, and I'm going to squeeze some of that out. Another pin. And this one, I don't know what happened to it. I think I crunched it somehow. Um, and I cross-contaminated, so that's less than ideal. But since I was going to use that color anyways, it's not the end of the world. Now, if you are watching Cynthia's tutorial, was it last night or the night before? If you're going to thin these types of paints out, you don't want to use straight up water. And the reason why is that it's not necessarily compatible. You use that to wash your brushes out. So you always want to start with a dry brush, and this glazing liquid will thin your paints out so that you can get glazes. The glazing liquid will make glazes. And I know that's pretty self-evident from the name, but in case you were wondering. Now, I'm just going to do a light wash on top. And it's got this kind of pinky color, but I've only added just a drop of that pink to it, that ruby color. And what this is going to do is it's going to help bump up the saturation of the color and really get it to have that kind of vibrantly saturated color. As opposed, like before, we were getting a little bit muddy, and that's not terrible. But adding this nice glaze is going to really pop that color and blend everything as well. So not only are we blending all of the colors in this ombre so that it's almost seamless, but we're also going to really intensify that color. And wherever there is kind of that lighter color, it's going to really you're going to see that pink. Over the darker colors, when it dries, it's only going to be very faint that you're going to see it, but it'll be there. All right. So I'm just going to keep adding. With the gloss layers, I want to make sure that I do kind of even coats and that I don't go over and over the same spots. Now, what I mean by that is if it's starting to dry and you go over this with this gloss, it's going to create clumps. It's like urethane on a table. It's going to create clumps, and then you're going to be like, oh, I didn't mean for it to be clumpy. Now, generally speaking, whenever I do these glaze layers, I like to let it dry naturally. I don't like to use the heat gun unless I'm really gentle with it, and I keep the nozzle of the heat gun pretty far back. And the reason why, as we've seen earlier, is that it will create those cracks. But luckily it dries pretty quick. Like this is semi-tacky, but it's not wet. Not wet, you know. All right. And also, when you're doing this, if you scrape your brush like this, you're going to create a lip on the surface. So if you miss that, if you scrape your brush like this, you're going to create a lip on the side of your pendant. So just be mindful of that. Sometimes that's a cool effect, but also sometimes it looks like your coverage isn't smooth then. So just be mindful of that. All right. So I'm going to wash this brush out. I'm going to hit this with this pink glaze. This is the gessoed layer. And I'm going to take any bristles out extra. I'm just going to hit this real fast. And the reason why is because I've got it and I don't want to waste it. So I'm just going to put this on there. And it's just a pale kind of wash, but that's a cool effect too if you want kind of a watercolory effect. Not everything has to be like super saturated all the time. Sometimes it's nice to have that kind of washy. And depending on this, see like what I mean about if you go over it, it will start to clump up. So do as I say, not as I do, because I just clumped it up a little bit. That's fine. All right, I'm gonna wash that before that gets dried on there and impossible to take off. Okay, since we don't really have the luxury of letting paint dry or watching paint dry, I'm going to hit it with a heat gun, but not a lot because I don't want it to crack and get all kind of crusty. All right, I'm gonna gently touch it to see if I can handle it. It's still kind of hot, but that's all right. I'm just pressing this down, making sure that there's no kind of why things like bubbling up. All right, so that's cool. I'm gonna do something else just now. I should also say that if you go back and forth with your head pin, you will work hard in it. For this, that's no problem because it's in my dedicated nozzle opener. But if you're going to use this in the future for something, you're going to want to use it something that's not going to have a lot of bends to it. Because if you work hard in it and you work hard in it, it's going to be very tricky to bend this. All right. So the next thing is what I'm going to do is I'm going to embellish it with a little bit of maybe this iridescent color shift paint. Now, sometimes it's good to do tests. Like say you're doing like a production line and you want things to be consistent always across the board. It's good to do tests to see how it will react because this is surprisingly a bluer, like kind of a blue interference. So if we didn't want this to be blue and we want it to be more purple, like this looks really purple in here. We would want to have that, to be able to see. Now, because this is acrylic paint and not the vintage paint, we can use wet brushes with that. We don't want to use like a ton of water with it, but we can use just dry brush on it, just wipe off the excess water, and you don't have to be as particular about it. I'm going to hit this as well. Fill that kind of enhance some of that color on there so it's not super pale. I think that's really fun is that you have the power to make this completely customized. So if you have a bead that is like a weird color and you can't find anything that matches, you can always get inexpensive wooden beads that they use for like macrame. When we buy them by the pound and we get like, hundreds and thousands of them because they're so inexpensive. And you can paint those and have them be any color you want, which I think is pretty cool. Usually they come in pretty kind of chromatic like primary colors. They're not the most exciting always. But so I've just hit that real gently with that. Now I haven't forgotten about these stars, but I am, I think it looks nice when you create those layers of depth. So once I get to a more satisfying, or what I consider a more satisfying finished result, I'm going to go back over that and I'm just going to hit it just ever so slightly with like a gold. Now, you mean like, what? Gold? Why gold? Well, right now I'm working with a lot of purples, and that gold will really pop off of those. Well, it's a contrasting because it's a yellow base, so it will really pop against that. Now these layers of color chip paint, if you do them super thin, you can actually, they're very hard to see. It's very subtle. If you want this to be like super thick and super like saturated, what I would recommend instead of doing a super thick coat right off the bat is just do light coats, let them dry, let it dry, and then go back on top of it. And it will really intensify that color. And also that color shift effect. I got that hole plugged up. So I just blew on it and blew that hole right open. I huffed and puffed and blew that hole open. Now, sometimes when you add something like this interference paint or this color shift paint, it can, I don't want to say it will ruin your layers underneath, but it can sometimes obscure some of the work that you've already done. So that's not always my favorite. But the nice thing about that is that you can work with building interference just like building layers of paint. So I've got, like this looks like a pale kind of purple, but it's actually a gold. And when it dries, it kind of dries with this kind of silvery gold. So I'm just going to hit some of this just on the highlights, or just kind of around it, nothing super extra. If I don't like it, it's still wet, so I can just wipe it off. I may have to reapply the other coat underneath, but it's still pretty, it's not super difficult to reapply that because it was just, I wasn't doing anything tricksy too much. Now, sometimes what I'll do is I kind of have these ideas in my mind of where I've hit it already. So if I've hit an ombre like from the bottom and graduated that to the top, sometimes I'll think about where then I'll move from another side to add a little bit of interest and bring the eye around. The other thing is it doesn't have to be even all the way across. So like with here, I added a lot more, and then here I just lightly touched it and just lightly kissed that one side of it, and that is nice. Like naturally occurring things is not always, they're not always homogeneous across the board. Sometimes there's imperfections and sometimes there's color variations. Like with the sky, it's not all just all like clouds are not all just white. There's, little hints of grays and peach, and it's not uniformly a peach cloud. There's hints of like coral, and sometimes there's, a little bit of off-white, and there's sometimes gold, and, there's a lot of things that there's variations, and it's not a variation that's straight across the board, too. So, if you want to make your work look a little bit more natural, that's one thing, is not make everything be so even and perfect across the board. or symmetrical. Sometimes it's good to have a little bit of that variation. All right, so I'm going to hit this one more time with my heat gun. And I'm just working, it's nothing serious. I'm not like, because the layers that I work with are very thin to begin with. So I don't need to like really get in there and really bake that, dry it down, because the layers were fairly thin to begin with. So also I recommend going and looking, do a little bit of this and see if there's places that are noticeably distracting. Like sometimes you'll do something and it can look fine, but then under the light it will look kind of weird. So like if in hindsight, I probably would have taken that kind of goldy silver color and hit that moon, at least on the interior or something, and kind of made it more luminous. But it is what it is at this point. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a little bit of this carbon black, and I'm just going to need a touch of this. I don't need a lot. And I'm also going to need, this is a permanent violet dark. And you'll notice this is in a different bottle. And this is much more liquid. And the other one is a little bit more thick. So I'm going to add a little bit of this. This is also like a manganese purple, but with a little bit of red in it. And then the other thing that I'm going to put in is this one, the favorite. This is, if almost all of my paintings have this color in it. And I'm just going to need just a little drop of that. And you're going to be like, what in the world? That's not enough to do anything. And then I'm going to put a little bit of this phthalo green. As you're noticing, I'm also cleaning out my bottles as I go. And I want a nice soft brush that is going to be smooth. I don't want anything too like rough or coarse. And I'm going to gently mix this together. And this is going to make a beautiful kind of purplish dark gray color. It's a bluish gray. So I don't know if you can see that, but it's really one of my favorite blacks is that alizarin crimson or magenta mixed with phthalo green. I call it Osby black. I had a professor in college. He's since passed away, but his name was Ellsworth Osby. And he would talk about that, mixing that black, and how he is a black artist. So he was like, not all, black is beautiful. And he would talk about how sometimes, not all black colors were the same. Some were more red, and some were more blue, some were more green. And if we wanted to use black in our paintings, we didn't have to go straight to, the carbon black or the ivory black. We could mix our own and get really beautiful, more nuanced shades. Sometimes when we see a color, we just instantly make all these associations or base assumptions about it. But when we know what goes into it and the layers that go into kind of building that color up, I think there's a beautiful appreciation that comes with that. So I've watered this down, and I did use water. And you can see it is pooling, but I am interested in this effect. I am not fighting it. I am actually going with it. Um, I'm working on a surface that is slightly repelling it, and that is not, I'm not fighting that. I'm going with it. So it's kind of creating these kind of cool inky splotches. And I think those are cool. I think they're even though from the naked eye it looks like the surface is completely flat, there are some kind of variations within it. So the brush strokes that we've been building up, um, and I'm just gonna let it lay, leave it where it lays, so to say. Um, and why I'm doing that is I want them to really kind of puddle up into those recessed areas, even though they're really small and minute. And we're gonna have then we're gonna once it's dried a little bit, I'm gonna gently hit it with a heat gun. Normally, I would just leave it, walk away, and do another project for a little while. Um, but since we are on video and it is kind of a time crunch, I'm not going to let it sit as long as I would. And I'm just gently going over everything, letting all those layers marry together, harmonize, become one. And then, now here's where the Dramatica comes in. Are you all ready? Who's ready? I have to find it first. That'll be the interesting thing. I'm like, who's ready? Not me. And I'm gonna hit it with this golden iridescent gold deep. This is my favorite, one of my favorites. One of my favorite. And I just love this stuff, man. This is gorgeous. I have painted shoes with this that didn't last that long, but they look killer to start. I do want a relatively fine brush, and apparently all of my fine brushes I took to Tanya Crane's class. So I have some brushes that are not that great, but I'm not going to go dig around. So I have this. This is not that awesome, but I can take a little bit of that water and train it. If I see any stray hairs, I can always trim those. So I'm pulling and slightly twisting, and that will make a nice sharp point. I want this to be relatively sharp. And one thing that I'll do is if I have this like this, I'll roll it so that it's just at the tippy tip point. And if you have not enough paint, it will make not a good dot. That was not, it didn't come out very well. But if you have kind of a chompy end, it will come out a chompy little dot. And because it's like that, I'm just going to play with that. And just take my finger and use that to smash those dots in. And that, it's not what I wanted originally, but I wanted a controlled kind of dot, but this brush is kind of chewed up a little bit. So I'm just going to go with it. So, do any of you have any plans for tonight, or did you do anything over the weekend? I know that we don't have as many people as normal, but it is a holiday. Um, so that's to be expected. William's like, do you think people are actually going to be watching? So thank you to all of you who are out there watching or will watch the replay. And right now what I'm doing is I'm just going around the silhouette of the wolf or the fox. Since it's Halloween, I think we'll call it a wolf. We just finished a show and it was called The Bastard Son and the Devil Himself. And at first I was like, I don't know about this from the title, but it was actually pretty good. A little bit gross in some parts, but I thought charming. It's on streaming on Netflix right now. We're waiting for the next installment of Interview with a Vampire. We binged it. We were gonna watch it. I was gonna get it for Azalea for when she was here at the house, but she made a promise to watch it with her Zen friend. So I was like, well, I'm still gonna watch it. So that dude, I think, plays a better. I know this may be controversial. Some of y'all have the deep love of Tom Cruise, but I think this dude is a better Lestat. I'm gonna tell it. Maybe this is gonna get me in trouble. A lot better than Stuart Townsend. I mean, he was all right, but he was very like grumble Sonic. Um, but in a nice, pleasing way. So I'm just going to go over and hit some of these and dry brush the cutouts, and this is really going to make those pop. Suzanne says we had company over the weekend. That's good. Yeah, we kind of been watching some scary movies. Like I said, I had a headache most of the weekend, so I was mostly like laying in the dark room style. But when I was feeling better, we started watching this show that is, I guess it's put together by Guillermo del Toro, and he's the guy that did Pan's Labyrinth and The Shape of Water, and I think the Hellboy movies, and um, some of his stuff is kind of messed up, y'all. But not necessarily a bad way. But these are all like little. It's like a horror anthology, and I thought they're pretty good so far. I mean, some of them are a little bit weird, but that's kind of that genre, so you kind of have to go with it. Like somebody's like, "Oh, it's so bloody," and it's like, well, then put on Great British Baking Show, and even then they cut themselves. So, um, but it's like I don't want to like if you don't like blood or whatever, then that's not for you. But there was one episode with rats, and I definitely was not keen on that one. And William was laughing with delight at my torture. But oh well. All right. So I'm almost done with these. I'm gonna add one more layer, I think, to kind of bring it all together. Um, and I think it'll be nice to add a little bit of the Brazzle Dazzle to them. And the thing is that they are your own, so you'll know when they're ready. I can tell you put 8 layers, but if you want to do 6 layers and 6 layers is what makes you happy, then do 6 layers. You don't have to do 8 layers. If you want to do 9 layers, do 9 layers. But really, it's uh, as they say, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. So is kind of like trusting and guiding your intuition as an artist. I feel like intuition They don't necessarily talk about that like in school very much. Like we didn't have like a class on intuition, but I think intuition is so important when it comes to like when is enough is enough, you know, when is too many layers, you know. All right, I'm gonna put this away and close it up, wash out my brush. Lena says, I'm obsessed with Queen of the Dam though. Um, Mostly for Aaliyah, I think. And also if I did like the look of that guy, but I don't know. I like that. I like the new one though. That new one though is doing it for me. It's different. I think that that's the thing is like they took the core elements of the story and then they kind of did their own interpretation. And I know that sounds maybe slightly terrible, but they did a good job so far. There are some parts I'm like, not for me, but that's like everything. Um, you know, we all have our likes and dislikes. But so far, I like it. All right, so this is a color shift paint. This is kind of this bluish. It's a blue. It's like the opposite of this, where this is a purple base with a blue interference. This is a blue base with a purple interference. And I'm just gonna lightly, just ever so lightly. You know what? These are Thanos colors, so maybe I don't know about those. I started looking. I'm like, I mean, they're not, you know. Oh, wow. We'll see about this. I'm just hitting it. And that's just to break up some of that gold and kind of harmonize it a little bit with it. And also to bring back some of those warmer touches to it. So yeah, so we've been working on getting stuff ready for New York Jewelry Week. So we're going to be staying there coming up pretty soon. I'm excited to go. I haven't been back to New York in a really long time. So it's been making me think a lot about New York, which has been a little bit tricky, you know. There were people who I cared about who passed away in New York. So that's been a little bit challenging navigating that kind of those thoughts and feelings. But I kind of feel like, you know, if there's going to be a time for that, this is like the time, you know, the time of year, paying reverence to those who we have lost along the way. All right, so I'm pretty pleased with that. I'll wash this brush out. We don't have water hooked up here, so I keep these jugs of water. And then when I get home, I take the brushes and wash them more thoroughly with soap and water and warm water. There's also this brush cleaner called a Master's Brush Cleaner. I hate that name, but oh well. Um, so it's called the Master's Brush Cleaner, and I'm sure it's like Master and Apprentice or whatever, but still, I'm not wild about that name. And so yeah, so here you go. I'm gonna hit that one more time. I know I keep saying one more time, one more time. Because that is pretty quick drawing. Okay, let's go and add the glitter. I know. What am I doing? What am I doing, y'all? Getting wild. Maybe we'll use the glitter, maybe we won't. I think we will though. Let's do it. Let's just do it. This stuff stinks. And I mean that in the best way. It's this glitterific. I like it because it has different sizes. of glitter mixed in. So you get all like there's big pieces and small pieces. There's even pieces, and then there's some that are a little bit more organic-y. So I kind of like that. And I'm just dry brushing it like this. And that's mostly getting the small pieces. If you want to lay this, you can kind of scrape it up and lay like the bigger pieces like that. But that one is kind of super big, so I'm just going to peel that off. And the thing is also, like I said, is you don't have to do it all in one layer. So if you do this and you want to have a really super goldeny, glittery surface, apply multiple layers. Don't think you have to do it all in one go. Because this is starting to look like the cover of Practical Magic, at least my copy. There's a lot of different versions of it. That's probably one of my favorite books. Actually, Rules of Magic is my favorite from that series. That's another one that I like to. I'm like I only watch it during Halloween, but I probably watch that all the time and not just Halloween. I'll be honest. I'm like I only watch it on Halloween. That's like just like how the skulls in my house are only for Halloween decoration. Yeah, right. They're all the year long. William's like, do you think we should decorate for Halloween? And I was like, it's already decorated. Done. It's our house is kind of like a little bit weird in that there's like it's got all the different holidays all at once. It's like being in like a kind of a thrift store, I guess. There's Christmas stuff, there's Halloween, there's autumn leaves. Depending where you look, it's a new reality. Um, all right. So I placed this glitterific on there. I'm gonna hit it one more time, y'all. One more time with heat gun. Probably like 3 more times. And that was super sticky, y'all. So if this is let to its own devices and cools naturally, it actually cools very beautifully and clear. But if you try to force it, also if you didn't see what I just did, is I accidentally got glitter in that hole. So I just took this round nose plier and helped it gently coax that hole open. Like this has glitter in the hole. I'm going to gently coax that open. I'm going to do it while it's still kind of relatively wet or, still malleable, because if you wait until it's dry, you can still do it. All is not lost. However, it is harder and sometimes you can damage the surface. So while it's still pliable because it's still slightly tacky, it will have a little bit more forgiveness for what you do to it. All right. So, what do you think of that? Do you like that? That astral wolf, Halloween wolf? What about this? This little shatter star pendant. Y'all digging it? Or this moon, this crescent moon. I like it. Or this infinite raven. It looks like it's gonna soar off into the cosmos. I mean, this is very cool. I love them. Or this kitty cat. Facebook user says very cool. This one I think would be cool to layer with something in the back so that you get that kind of black cat effect. I think would be neat. So I'll keep an eye out on that. All right, so I'm gonna turn this around and do one quick, because they are a little slightly tacky. So I am gonna hit it one more time. One more time with like a broken record, y'all. I didn't do the back of this one. What was I thinking? Oh, that's the one I did the gesso on. Oops. I'll do that later. Also, I noticed that there is some of my paintbrush. The paint was coming off the paintbrush and it flaked into the paint, which normally wouldn't bother me, but you can kind of see it. So, all right, let me go. You know what? I'm going to hit these with a little bit. I'm going to dry these out and then I'm going to hit them with a gloss. And the reason why is I want all those things to be really cooked in and not just so that you can peel off the glitter, you know? All right. I'm going to dab it a little bit. As you can tell, it's still slightly tacky. That's going to probably be tacky. I should let this, in theory, dry the full time. And I'm not letting it do its thing. But, you know, we got things to do. People got stuff to do. Can't just be waiting for paint to dry. All right. So while this is drying a little bit naturally, I might do another technique. What do you say? All right, I've got this liquid polymer. This is clear liquid polyclay. It's Kato polyclay. And this stuff never dries. So if it does dry once you heat it, but if you spill this, it is pretty much a nightmare to clean up. So just keep that in mind, friends. And I'm just gonna need, I'm like, just a drop. Yeah, that's not just a drop, y'all. That's okay. I'm gonna move these to the side. And one of the things that I like to mix in with this is dry powder. And I'm going to use a little bit of mica powder, and that's going to help color my liquid polymer. And I'm going to try to pick a pretty... that's a pearl. Let's see, what do I have? Let's see. I've got a couple different colors. All right, so this is a Pearlex powder. And I'm going to use one of these popsicle sticks. I'm just going to use the barest little touch of this. And that will color my liquid polymer. Now you want to make sure that when you're mixing this, you really mix that powder in, because otherwise you're going to see it. You're going to see those little clumps. And normally I don't mind that. You know, when you're working with real glazes and real ceramic glazes, there are sometimes that little bits of particles and color in there. So I don't necessarily mind that. It actually gives it an authentic kind of uh, looks like ceramic. So I'm just going to mix that in. I am going to try to mix in a little bit of this interference blue, because I think that that will be just nice. It will just add a little bit of something, something to it, and it won't be just all plain. So this is the interference blue. This is actually not Perlex. This is Illumidust, which is basically the same thing. And I'm just going to put a little bit of this. And by a little, apparently I meant a lot. And I think that these go a long way. Lena says, I think the Raven is my favorite tonight. Yeah, I think it turned out pretty good. And so another thing, like I was talking about earlier, is sometimes if you don't mix things and there's dry components in there, like the powders, it can get clumpy, like a lumpy gravy. So just keep mixing it and it will eventually combine. And don't forget, every once in a while, you can make sure the spatula or whatever you're using, the stick, is you're getting that off there. It's kind of like how you have to scrape the sides down of the bowl every once in a while. In theory, I should use a palette knife, but oh well. All right, so I'm gonna get a little bit of this Smurf juice and get some of that on my finger so that it's nice and sticky. And then I'm just gonna lightly go over everything. And I don't know how this is gonna turn out actually. We're adding a lot of different techniques, and this could be really cool, or it could look like garbage. So don't get too many high hopes. I shouldn't say that, right? I should be like, oh, it's going to be so beautiful. It's going to be the most beautiful thing in all of your life. It will change your life. But, I'm being honest. I'm being real with y'all. And so I'm just going to dab this. I want there to be at least a couple of, I don't want it to be super thin because then it won't do anything. And then if it's super thick, it will look gloopy, like I poured glue all over everything. So I want there to be enough the depth that it looks like a glaze, and then enough, but not too much, but not too little. And that's what I was saying earlier about intuition, is sometimes you have to be able to trust yourself and how that'll turn out. We're going off script, y'all. We don't know what's happening. Maybe it is, maybe it'll work, maybe it won't. We'll see. In theory, these are tried and tested methods on their own, but in combination, will it be too much, or will it be just right? Tune in next time. No, keep watching. I am gonna hit it with a heat gun. Y'all thought it was done, right? No, I'm not. And then like, I didn't know we were gonna be on for 5 hours for Halloween. The Halloween painting marathon. Well, hopefully y'all are doing stuff while we're doing things, while I'm showing you stuff. So that you're not just like, or maybe I'm just like so entertaining that y'all are like wrapped with, you're like transfixed. No. It's nice to work. I usually, when I'm watching videos like this, I will If it's something I've never done, I pay more closer attention. But if I have experience with it, then I make sure I kind of have it playing in the background. I always have something playing in the background. I don't know about y'all. I like to. I used to think that I like to work in silence, but my head wanders if it's too quiet. So I like to have music or these videos playing, live presentations. Luckily, I know a great place called the Great Beat Extravaganza that has tons of videos available for free. You learn all about barrel knots with Kelly and, um, you know, lots of. Ooh, of course, of course. That's sandwich face down. So I just dropped that and I dropped it in the felt, and there is little boogers in there. Oh wow. It's like, when you drop the sandwich and the sandwich goes jelly side down. Oh wow. Luckily I don't have to eat this, so it doesn't matter. Like, 5-second rule doesn't apply to wet stuff, I don't think. Like dry stuff you can convince yourself that it's fine. It depends whose kitchen. All right. So I'm going to wipe my fingers so that I don't make my heat gun sticky. I'm also going to wipe my board. And sometimes I don't. Sometimes I just cook it directly onto the tile, and then I will peel it off. But because I'm working with limited space, I'm going to wipe it off so that I have more space to cook stuff. Because when you're on the edge here, you're gonna hit some of that, whatever's underneath, and that can be potentially bad. Suzanne says dinner is in the oven, so I'm enjoying the technique. Thanks. And Amanda says I'm beating. I had to turn out the porch light because I ran out of candy, and we had tons too. I don't know how William is doing at the house. Usually we get a fair good number of trick-or-treaters because we live in town. So we'll see. And really, if I wanted this to be, I should put this in the oven. I should put this in the oven because that way it's a gentle, even heat. I hit this a little too hard with the heat gun, and it's a little bit crater time, which is not necessarily bad since it's the moon, but All right. So clearly, I did not anticipate how yuck that would look. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bake these in an oven at two or at 300 for 20 minutes. All right. 300 degrees Fahrenheit for 20 minutes. And it probably doesn't even have to be that long, but that will give me the clearest. I probably will do it half as long. I will preheat my oven and put these in there. So obviously, I'm not going to do that on camera because, um, you know, if I was really doing like that, oh, I'm going off script, and then that dude has the slides on the backup, I'd be like, oh, I'm going off script and doing this thing and experimenting with this, and then go and then be like, oh, but with the power of TV, I have these ready. Unfortunately, that's not how this went. This is very freeform. So I will put these in the oven and let them cure, and then maybe tomorrow I'll make jewelry with these pieces since I have to go on tomorrow too from Tuesday. So for now, I'm gonna flip the camera around. You're gonna have to just wait with bated breath to see how these turn out. Um, I thought I was gonna do another costume change, but I'm not. This looks ridiculous. And I have stuff all over my hands. So, yeah. So today I was going to hold it up. And then I was like, no, probably we shouldn't. Probably we shouldn't hold the sticky piece up vertically so it drips all over the floor. So I'm gonna cook these in the oven and let the polymer cure. Usually I do 275, but to get the most clear it can be, that little extra bit of heat will help clear it out and make it a lot clearer, and more translucent. So I'm gonna follow-ish the directions. If it needs more time, I can always put it back in the oven. I don't want to overcook it because it will get to be a bubbly, soupy mess. So I don't necessarily want to do that, but yeah. All right. So I hope you all have a very festive Halloween, and or a somber Samhain, or however you're celebrating tonight, All Hallows Eve. It has been fun hanging out with you all and making some stuff and decorating these pieces. We'll see how they turn out. Hopefully, well, since we spent 2.5 hours making them or embellishing them. So we'll see. But I'm excited to be on tomorrow. Hopefully, you have a great rest of your evening. And if you painted along or you're inspired to paint, please share it in the Design Challenge group. That's Allegory Gallery Design Challenge. This one. Um, and if you are inspired to share with us, please do, because we'd love to see how it looks. I know a bunch of y'all got the new paints from Cynthia or from Jamie, and have been working with them and playing around with them. So I would love, or from Sarah, because they were just showing those a couple weeks ago. So I would love to see what you make. We should be getting these wooden cutout pendants back online fairly soon. I'm going to say by the end of the week, because that'll give us enough time to set everything up. But we're super excited. I don't know if you missed the beginning of this, you may have missed the good news that we were able to get our laser. So super excited about that. We just have to set it up. We're going to set it up in the dining room, which sounds kind of weird because most people are like, I eat in my dining room. And most people probably do, but we hardly use our dining room. So William's office, we've had it in William's office for many years now. And yeah, it'll be nice for him to reclaim his office a little bit more. All right, Lena says, I am waiting for the new paints and seeing how they are different from the old paints. Yeah, I don't know. I haven't worked with the new paints yet. So Cynthia says she likes them a lot, so I'm gonna have to get a set and try them out. Facebook users, that is great news. Yeah, I think it's pretty good. We'll be able to get back in business making these pendants. All right. Well, we will see you all later. Happy Halloween. And if you celebrate, happy Day of the Dead tomorrow. And much love and gratitude to all of you out there. All right. See ya.